Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Kyle moved into his dream home, he expected peace, not war. But when a rogue HOA tried to illegally seize control of his property, they triggered a battle they never saw coming. Surveillance, forged documents, and a conspiracy no gate could keep out. It was just after 6 in the evening when I pulled through the freshly oiled private drive of my new home, a sleek stretch of asphalt flanked by sycamores and a white picket fence that was more for charm than defense. My Range Rover's tires crunched over gravel as the security gate slid open without a sound, triggered by my approach. I had spent the last 6 months planning this move, the last 6 weeks coordinating it, and the last 6 days installing enough surveillance to make a cartel paranoid. The property spanned 6 acres. That might not sound like much to someone used to open country, but in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, 6 acres made you feel like an oil baron. The previous owner was a paranoid ex-lawyer who believed the government was watching his lawn grow. He'd built the bones of a fortress. I simply upgraded it. Biometric access points, layered perimeter sensors, solar-powered backup systems, and a top-of-the-line AI-controlled surveillance network. Not because I was afraid of crime. No. Because I worked in the business of security, and I knew better than anyone how fast things went south when you assumed you were safe. What I didn't expect was for the first sign of trouble to come wearing khakis, name badges, and the self-righteous smirk of bureaucratic suburban authority. I'd been on the property less than a week when the weirdness started. It began small, pamphlets left in my mailbox welcoming me to Sycamore Bluffs, a community I'd never heard of and definitely hadn't agreed to join. I tossed them. Figured it was some generic neighborhood watch nonsense or a realtor's Hail Mary. Then came the HOA welcome packet. This one was fancier, branded folder, business card of someone named Karen Blakely, and a neatly folded printout of community guidelines, which included restrictions on flagpoles, curtain color, and holiday decorations exceeding 10 lumens. 10 lumens. My damn toothbrush has more than that. I scanned through the documents. They were written like a dictator's wet dream. I checked my title again, twice. No mention of an HOA. Nothing in the deed. My attorney had confirmed it during the purchase. The property was carved out decades ago, independent from the surrounding community. I wasn't just not in the HOA. I was legally excluded from it, so I ignored the packet. That's when the call started. It was 1:16 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was asleep, or at least I had been. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. 30 seconds later, it buzzed again. Different number, then another, and another. By the time I finally answered out of pure irritation, I'd counted 60 missed calls in the span of 20 minutes. I thought someone had died. "Hello," I barked, already sliding out of bed. "Mr. Harris, this is Brad from Sycamore Bluffs HOA. We've been trying to reach you. At 1 in the goddamn morning?" "It's urgent," he said, like that explained anything. "We need you to open the gate and surrender your access credentials." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "You need to open the main gate immediately and provide keys or codes to your auxiliary entry points. HOA requires access to all properties within the security perimeter." I laughed. "That's cute. I'm not part of your HOA, Brad." A pause. Then, "That's incorrect. All homes in this area." "I suggest you check your map," I interrupted. "This property isn't in your jurisdiction." He didn't answer. The line went dead. 30 seconds later, my security feed pinged. I tapped open the live view on my phone. 2 figures were standing at the gate. Both wore navy windbreakers with the HOA logo. One had a flashlight. The other had what looked like a clipboard, or maybe a citation book. I slipped on sweats and went down to the front room, pulling up the external intercom. "Please back away from the gate," I said, voice calm but firm. "Sir, this is a violation of Sycamore Bluffs community access standards," one of them shouted. "Gate obstruction is not permitted." "This isn't Sycamore Bluffs," I replied. One of them stepped closer, leaned toward the gate, and tried to reach through the narrow opening between the bars. That's when I hit the red button, triggering the voice warning on loop. "Warning, you are trespassing on private property. Law enforcement has been notified." That was a lie, but not for long. I picked up my phone and called the non-emergency police line. About 10 minutes later, a cruiser rolled up. One officer stepped out, his flashlight sweeping lazily over the figures at my gate. I stepped out onto the porch in plain sight. "Evening," the officer called. "Can we talk?" Sure, I said, walking down the path to the front edge of the yard. These gentlemen are trespassing. They say they're from the local HOA. They can say they're from NASA. Doesn't mean they have jurisdiction here. He shifted uncomfortably. Do you have proof you're not in the HOA? You mean besides the fact that they're at my locked gate at 2 in the morning demanding keys? He didn't love that. Look, I'm not here to referee a civil dispute. If this is a misunderstanding, I'd recommend you take it up with their board. Would you recommend that before or after they try to scale my fence? One of the HOA guys, the taller one, muttered something I couldn't hear. The officer sighed. All right, everyone, let's de-escalate. I'm going to need you to leave the property, sir, he said, finally addressing them. The two men backed off slowly, but not before the clipboard guy hissed, "You're in violation. This isn't over." The gate slowly slid shut. I stood in silence for a few minutes, watching the patrol car drive off into the night. Something about that cop's face stuck with me. Not aggressive, not apologetic either. More like annoyed that I didn't just roll over. I walked back inside and locked every point of access again manually. Then I sat in front of my monitor and reviewed the last 10 minutes of footage. Not because I doubted what I'd seen, but because I knew, deep down, that this wasn't some misunderstanding. This was just the beginning. The envelope was thick and officious looking, the kind of thing that tried to intimidate you just by existing. It arrived the next morning via a smugly smiling courier who didn't say a word, just had me sign something on a tablet and walked off like he'd delivered a bomb. He wasn't far off. Inside was a tri-folded packet titled, "Notice of Regulatory Non-Compliance and Immediate Corrective Action Required." It had the Sycamore Bluffs HOA seal watermarked across every page like it was a royal decree. I flipped through the pages, reviewing the highlights with growing disbelief and a creeping sense of déjà vu. According to the document, I was now being cited for refusal to provide community security access to property infrastructure, illegally installed obstruction automated gate without HOA approval, non-compliance with Section 7B regarding mandatory key code submission for emergency access. It even cited a line that said, all residents must provide the HOA with physical keys or digital entry credentials for emergency or inspection purposes. That would have been hilarious if it wasn't so uncomfortably official looking. They'd gone as far as referencing a revised covenant that supposedly applied retroactively, like they were rewriting history with a Microsoft Word template. There was even a line about how I had willingly accepted community terms upon settlement of property ownership. That one nearly made me spill my coffee. I grabbed my phone and called Dana, the title agent I'd worked with. She answered groggily. It was just past 8, and I gave her the short version. Can you pull up the original closing documents for the house? I asked. I need to confirm something about HOA jurisdiction. Sure, but I already told you. Your parcel was carved out before the neighborhood was built. You're not in their HOA. I know, but they're pretending I am. 10 minutes later, she emailed me a clean PDF stamped with all the right certifications. Section 17 of the deed. Exempt from all neighborhood association jurisdiction due to historical independence as recorded in County Deed Book 332, page 904. I printed it, framed it, considered tattooing it. Then I scanned and forwarded it to the HOA's email along with a very polite note. Dear Ms. Blakely, I am not, have never been, and will not be a member of the Sycamore Bluffs HOA. Please cease all correspondence and remove my name and property from any internal rosters immediately. Further attempts to exert authority over my legally autonomous property will be treated as harassment and referred to legal counsel. Sincerely, Kyle Harris. Not 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. New voicemail. Mr. Harris, this is Karen Blakely, president of the Sycamore Bluffs HOA. We received your letter. I believe you're under some misunderstanding. Our records indicate your property is within the revised community perimeter and subject to our updated covenants. I'd be happy to schedule a compliance meeting to review the expectations. Please call me back within 24 hours to avoid escalation. Escalation. By noon, flyers started appearing on utility poles near my driveway. A resident endangering neighborhood security? One local homeowner is refusing to comply with safety access standards and is putting the entire community at risk. Demand transparency. HOA meeting Thursday. My name wasn't on them. But my gate sure as hell was, printed in black and white, circled in red like I was some kind of hostile actor on a battlefield map. By early evening, someone actually left a note under my windshield at the grocery store. "You're not above the community. Get over yourself." This was turning into a slow-motion car crash with a marching band playing outside my window. So I did the only rational thing. I lawyered up. A friend recommended Marla Pike, a civil liberties attorney who once sued an entire county sheriff's department for zoning fraud and won. She had a phone voice like gravel and caffeine. "They're trying to absorb your parcel," she said after reviewing everything, "and they're hoping you'll blink first." Absorb it? Can they even do that? No. But if you don't respond, don't document, don't push back, they'll treat silence as permission. They fake consent, then file it as precedent. I hated everything about that sentence. That evening, I started documenting every voicemail, every flyer, every car that slowed down in front of my property. I mounted 2 extra cameras by the mailbox. I started a file folder labeled HOA War Crimes. And then the next punch landed. A certified envelope arrived titled Notification of Legal Review Pending. It said the HOA was considering legal action to remedy persistent non-compliance and ensure alignment with community safety expectations. That was their wording for, "We're going to try to sue you into submission." I dropped the letter on my kitchen counter and stared at it like it might burst into flames. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It was an operation. They weren't trying to talk to me. They were trying to claim me. 3 nights later, at 2:27 in the morning, the perimeter alert went off with a quiet buzz on my phone. I was already half awake, a consequence of the gnawing anxiety that had taken permanent residence in the pit of my stomach. I grabbed the phone and swiped into the security feed, my breath catching the moment the infrared view flickered to life. 2 men were crouched along the southern edge of the property, just past the gravel maintenance path. One of them was the same clipboard jackass from the gate, the so-called specialist from the HOA's security committee. The other was taller, broader, and unmistakably the deputy HOA president, Michael Grant. Both were wearing matching dark jackets with reflective HOA patches stitched onto the sleeves, like they were proud to cosplay as authority figures at 2 in the damn morning. They weren't just loitering, they were climbing over my fence. Not attempting, not inspecting, climbing. I switched to the interior camera feed in time to see them drop onto my lawn, crouch, and make a beeline toward the rear basement entry, my utility access door which led straight into the electrical room. I sat still for a half second, not moving, brain flipping between, "Are you kidding me?" and "Is this actually happening?" Then I acted. I dialed the county police and explained in a calm but very specific tone that 2 individuals were trespassing on private property, attempting forced access, and that it was caught live on camera with time-stamped footage. Dispatcher assured me officers were en route. By the time I got to the back patio door, I could see the intruders fiddling with the service panel next to the basement entrance. I hit the floodlights. They froze. Deer in headlights. Michael Grant raised a hand awkwardly, like we were bumping into each other at a barbecue. "Kyle, hey, sorry about the timing." "Don't move," I snapped, loud enough to make it echo. They backed up slowly, trying to look harmless. The specialist was gripping a key ring, one of those universal maintenance sets. My door had no lock that took a standard key, so that was interesting. I didn't say another word. Just stood there watching until the first squad car rolled up to the gate. Lights off, but high beams pointed straight down the drive. A few minutes later, the second car arrived, and a familiar face stepped out. Officer Clint Wallace. Of course. Same guy who showed up when the HOA goons first knocked on my gate in the middle of the night. Same guy who wasn't sure about the jurisdiction. He strolled up the path with the kind of slow, disinterested gait that said he was already planning to write this off as nothing. He greeted the 2 intruders first. "Evening, Mike." "Tim." "What's going on?" Michael Grant gave a sheepish smile. "Just responding to a maintenance issue. Routine stuff." I stepped forward. They broke onto my property, climbed the fence, tried to access my basement entry. Wallace nodded absently. "You got that on camera?" "Several angles," I replied, handing him my tablet with the footage queued up. He watched for a bit, then handed it back. "I mean, technically there's no sign posted on that edge. There's a 6-foot fence and a locked gate with a retinal scanner," I said, trying to keep the fury from boiling into sarcasm. "You don't need a sign to know you're not invited." Grant cut in. "Clint, it's a misunderstanding. HOA protocols require inspections. We thought we had proper authorization. I stared at him. From who? Me. Because I'd love to see that. And then he did it. Grant reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It's a standing order, he said. Maintenance request for infrastructure compliance. Signed by you. He handed it to Wallace before I could snatch it. Wallace looked it over, nodded slightly. You recognize this, Mr. Harris? I leaned in, glanced once, and my stomach turned. It had my signature, my name, my address. But I'd never seen that document in my life. That's a forgery, I said. I want that entered into evidence. Wallace folded the paper and tucked it into his chest pocket. I'll take it under review, he muttered. No, you'll secure it for chain of custody. That's a felony, he sighed, long and dramatic, as if I'd just asked him to recite Shakespeare. Look, Mr. Harris, this all seems like an unfortunate confusion. No harm was done. No entry was made. I don't see a reason to escalate this further tonight. They trespassed. It's your word against theirs, and they say they had authorization. I turned and pointed at the 4 mounted cameras above the door, their infrared lights still glowing red. My cameras say otherwise, and so will my lawyer. So unless you're planning to charge them, or me, you better write this up correctly. Wallace gave me a look, not angry, not even annoyed, just tired. The kind of tired that said, this isn't worth my effort, and I wish you'd stop making it my problem. He let them go. He let both of them go. Said they'd follow up in the morning. After they left, I went straight to my laptop, backed up the footage to an encrypted cloud drive, and sent it to Marla, my attorney. Then I triple-checked every lock, barrier, and sensor on the property. By sunrise, things were about to get worse. When I walked outside later that morning, my front gate was wide open, hanging slightly off its hinge like it had been ripped or forced. The access control pad was gone. Wires dangled like snapped tendons. I called my security contractor in a panic. They arrived within the hour. Their lead tech looked confused, then concerned. We got a work order from you 2 days ago, he said. Said you wanted the old system dismantled and updated to HOA standards. Sent via email. I didn't send any request. He showed me the email. It was from my personal address, same signature, same footer, identical tone, but I hadn't sent it. The damage came out to just over $18,000. And it was clear now. They weren't just harassing me. They were trying to own me, by any means necessary. By the next morning, something in me had shifted. Up until now, I'd been playing defense, locking gates, calling cops, filing complaints like a good little citizen. But after the fake work order, the forced gate, and Officer Wallace's performance, I realized I was dealing with something a hell of a lot deeper than nosy suburban bureaucrats. This wasn't about some HOA wanting to enforce garden gnome regulations. This was a hostile acquisition. And I don't get acquired. I spent the next 72 hours doing what I do best, building a security perimeter that didn't just keep people out, but made sure the right people were watching when they tried to get in. First, I upgraded the gate to a military-grade barrier, hydraulic with auto-lock fail-safes and reinforced steel. Then I installed a second tier of hidden biometric locks behind the service doors, accessible only via retina scan. I upgraded my surveillance system to include heat mapping, gate recognition, and AI face tracking with threat logging. Every frame, every audio byte was backed up in real time to 3 encrypted servers in different states. And then I made one more addition. A camera aimed outside the property, pointed directly at the street, the sidewalk, and the corner where HOA creepers like to loiter in their windbreakers. I didn't just want to watch what happened inside my fence. I wanted to watch them watching me. Then I called Marla. She was already 5 steps ahead. They've crossed the line into civil harassment and fraud, but we're not filing yet. Why the hell not? Because I want them to dig the hole deeper. Let them think you're isolated. We'll file when they're too far gone to climb out. She was right. If we hit back too soon, they'd wriggle out with technicalities. We needed weight. So I documented every single thing. Every HOA voicemail archived. Every anonymous flyer scanned. Every time I caught someone lingering near my property, I noted the time, the face, the vehicle. I started a photo collection like I was hunting serial killers. Then came the next twist. I received a letter from the county planning office. Inside was a copy of a community map amendment application. Apparently, the HOA had filed to expand the official boundaries of Sycamore Bluffs to include my parcel. Attached was a statement of consent signed by yours truly, except I never signed it. I called the planning office. They emailed me the scanned document. There it was again, my name, my address, my signature. But this time, it was laughably wrong. My name was spelled Keeley in one spot, and they'd used an old zip code I hadn't lived in since college. The signature looked like a toddler traced my initials with a crayon, but to a lazy bureaucrat behind a desk, looked good enough. I marched that straight to Marla. She whistled when she saw it. That's criminal fraud. If they filed that knowingly, that's state jail time. I asked her how likely it was that this could succeed, that I could just wake up one day and find myself officially part of a community I'd never agreed to. On paper, not likely, but in practice, she tapped the document. They're counting on inertia, that no one will check, that you won't push back. And if they stack enough of these, they'll have a record that makes it look like you've been a member for years. That same day, I learned I wasn't the only one. I was getting my mail. Paranoia now made me check the box wearing sunglasses and noticed an older woman standing on the sidewalk, staring at my gate. She looked half lost, like she was trying to decide whether to knock or run. I called out to her. She flinched but didn't leave. Her name was Janet Moore, 71 years old, lived a few blocks away. She'd been in Sycamore Bluffs for 15 years, owned her home outright. 2 months ago, she got a letter from the HOA demanding backdated dues for unregistered members. The threat, failure to pay, would result in a lien on her home. She panicked and paid $4,000. Now they were threatening her with legal action because she refused to allow quarterly inspections. She came to me because someone told her I was the guy with the gate. We sat on my porch, and she told me everything. Her story was different from mine in scale, but not in shape. I asked her to send me all her documents. She did. Her consent to join was forged too. Same font, same phrasing, different victim. That night, I launched a burner blog. I called it Gated and Gaslit. I uploaded redacted versions of our documents, anonymized videos of the late-night HOA stalkers, and a timeline of harassment tactics. I left the comments open. Within a day, the site got over 200 hits. By day 3, the emails started pouring in. 6 other homeowners, same neighborhood, same tactics, fake consent forms, threats of liens, mysterious compliance inspections that led to damage and surprise bills. We weren't isolated targets. We were a business model. The Sycamore Bluffs HOA had created a self-funding machine backed by fraud, enforced through intimidation, and cloaked in the language of community wellness. And I had just turned the lights on. The moment I realized we were in a full-blown war wasn't when I got the fake legal notices, or when the gate was sabotaged, or even when they tried to trespass and smile their way through it. It was when I found out they had taken this playbook of lies and applied it to my neighbors, to real people, to Janet. That was the line, and now we were sharpening the knives. Marla filed the first round of legal notices, a cease and desist aimed squarely at the Sycamore Bluffs HOA, citing unauthorized boundary expansion, document forgery, property interference, and civil harassment. We CC'd the county recorder's office, the sheriff's department, the zoning board, and just for fun, the local news tip line. But that wasn't the punch. That was the jab. The punch came a few days later when we submitted formal intent to pursue civil litigation. And just like that, the HOA switched tactics. They went quiet. No flyers, no emails, no drive-bys. The calm before the lawsuit-shaped storm. So I kept digging, and the deeper I went, the darker it got. See, when a system this shady exists, it always leaves residue, paperwork, payments, communications that don't quite line up. And with Janet's help and the blog pulling in news stories daily, I started assembling a disturbing timeline. Multiple homeowners, at least 9 confirmed, had been incorporated into Sycamore Bluffs over the past 3 years using the same strategy: fake consent forms with clumsy signatures, retroactive invoices for unpaid dues, threats of legal action or liens, a bizarre pattern of security inspections that ended with property damage and maintenance bills. It was a damn racket, and they had help. One of the homeowners, Victor Tran, a retired Air Force captain, sent me a letter he'd received from a local property registrar confirming that his home was successfully added to HOA jurisdiction following a vote. Vote. There had never been a vote. That's when Marla said the word I'd been waiting for. Conspiracy, she muttered on the phone. This isn't just civil overreach anymore. This is coordinated fraud. We started contacting every agency that might listen: the Georgia State Attorney General's Office, the Department of Consumer Protection, the State Housing Authority. We prepared formal complaints with affidavits from Janet, Victor, and 2 others. Then I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a USB drive and a handwritten note. You don't know me, but I used to work in their office. This is what you're looking for. Don't trust the local cops. Some of them are on the take. Burn it after you're done. I plugged it into a disposable laptop I kept for paranoid reasons. The files were a goldmine: internal emails, drafts of consent forms, a spreadsheet titled Integration Targets Phase First, which listed addresses, including mine, with columns for status, dues assessment, and board-approved fee schedule. My name was labeled as hostile, engage via compliance route, risk, legal. They had a file on me. Probably several, and nestled in the email chains was the smoking gun. A PDF attachment between Karen Blakely and someone named DM. Subject, County Update, Kyle Parcel. Filed new map version with registrar friend. Confirmed they'll slide it through after next update batch. Get signature done by Friday. Use old one from last year if needed. HOA docs will reflect change in April regardless of his response. They planned to fake my consent even after I explicitly refused. That was it. We had them. And not just Karen. DM turned out to be Douglas Merton, assistant registrar at the county office, a guy with a spotless record and a cozy relationship with the Sycamore Bluffs board, apparently. We filed an emergency injunction to freeze all HOA activities related to boundary expansion and to subpoena Douglas's office. And that's when things really started to spiral. I came home 2 nights later to find one of my external Wi-Fi access points ripped clean off the siding, wires still dangling. My security logs showed a forced reboot of my system around 3 in the morning. Someone had tripped a signal overload, likely with a jammer or a cloned key fob. Only one person I knew had access to law enforcement-grade signal interference equipment: Officer Clint Wallace. Marla and I filed a separate complaint with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, citing possible misuse of law enforcement tools in support of private actors. That was enough to get their attention. By the end of the week, I had a callback from someone in the federal building downtown. They wanted to talk. And just like that, the war that started with flyers and phone calls had reached federal territory. The GBI office was a granite-faced building downtown that looked exactly like what you'd imagine: part DMV, part prison, part tax audit. I wasn't in a suit, but I wore the next best thing: a button-down, clean-shaven face and the expression of a man who'd finally stopped caring about being polite. The agent assigned to my case introduced herself as Special Investigator Carmen Reyes. She was calm, precise, and had the kind of stare that could bore through titanium. "We've been tracking irregular complaints out of Sycamore Bluffs for a while," she said, "but no one had hard proof. You may be the first one with a paper trail and possibly a public official involved." I slid the USB across the desk. "This is the hole in the hull." She plugged it in, watched, read, said nothing. At the end, she nodded once and said, "We'll open a federal review, but you need to be aware, this won't be quiet." I smirked. It stopped being quiet when someone ripped my gate off. Back home, it was business as usual, or at least the HOA's version of business. That week, I received 4 new certified letters, each more desperate than the last. A final warning to attend a mandatory compliance hearing with the HOA board. A $1,200 invoice for emergency perimeter reaccess alignment. A threat of lien if I failed to remit membership dues in arrears, dating back 2 years. And my personal favorite, a notice that I'd been suspended from voting privileges in upcoming HOA elections. I wasn't in the damn HOA, but they were trying to bury me in fake legitimacy. I sent all of it to Reyes. Her response was 2 words: "Keep going." So I did. I contacted a local journalist, Amber Klein, a quiet investigative type with a gift for boiling blood without ever raising her voice. I gave her everything: the forged documents, the homeowner testimonies, the USB, the footage of the attempted break-in, and my favorite clip, Officer Clint Wallace letting 2 trespassers walk free with a damn handshake. The article hit that Friday under the headline, "The HOA That Swallowed a Neighborhood, Fraud, Forgery, and Fear in Sycamore Bluffs." By Sunday, it had over 70,000 views. By Monday, the mayor had issued a statement. And by Tuesday, Reyes called me back. "They're scared. Blakely lawyered up. Merton's trying to walk back his approvals. And Wallace," she paused, "he's under internal affairs review. They found a connection to a private contractor that sells electronic bypass kits. Your security gate model was on their client list. The heat was finally hitting the right necks, but Sycamore Bluffs wasn't going down quietly. Wednesday night, I heard it. A thud outside. I checked the cameras. 2 teens were running off, laughing. Left behind was a baseball bat and a shattered motion light. Petty vandalism, untraceable, except they weren't wearing masks. Face recognition tagged both. Guess who they were? Nephews of Michael Grant, HOA's vice president. That same night, a neighbor who had been supportive, Victor, called me in a panic. He'd been served with a letter from the HOA stating that his home was now under reassessment for code compliance, and that his property taxes would be reviewed accordingly. They were trying to financially suffocate us. But what they didn't know? The feds were already watching. Reyes filed for a seizure of digital records from the HOA board and the registrar's office. Subpoenas were issued, phones were pulled, emails scraped. They went through Karen Blakely's HOA laptop like a hot knife through butter. And guess what they found? A full list of over 30 properties targeted for acquisition via false consent. Communications between Karen, Merton, and a private law firm that had drafted multiple forged agreements. Internal memos openly discussing fraudulent record-keeping as a necessary tactic for HOA growth. The word necessary was underlined. But the cherry on top? An email from Karen Blakely to an unnamed recipient, likely Merton, saying, "Harris is getting too loud. If we can't absorb him, we discredit him." Discredit me. They were too late. The story was already spreading across the internet like wildfire. Talk shows picked it up. A true crime podcast requested an interview. One Reddit thread titled "This HOA Tried to Annex Me" hit the front page with over 10,000 comments. Then came the knock. FBI. They wanted copies of everything I had. And that was the moment I realized this had officially left the realm of crazy HOA and entered federal conspiracy territory. The morning of the hearing, I wore black. Not out of grief. There was nothing left to mourn, but because I figured if Karen Blakely was going to watch her kingdom fall, I might as well dress for the occasion. The federal hearing was held at the downtown courthouse under tight security. The GBI and FBI had coordinated the effort, flanked by state housing officials and representatives from the Attorney General's office. It wasn't a criminal trial yet, but it was the first public step toward it, a formal evidentiary session to determine the scope and legality of HOA activities and whether the case warranted federal prosecution. The Sycamore Bluffs delegation arrived in full force. Karen Blakely wore a beige blazer and a face like she hadn't slept in days. Michael Grant, her vice president, avoided eye contact with everyone and looked about 3 seconds from vomiting. And there, like a termite with a badge, sat Douglas Merton, arms folded, jaw locked. I sat across the aisle from them with Marla, Victor, Janet, and 2 other homeowners. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The room already smelled like blood. The session opened with a dry statement of purpose, but that was just the wrapping paper. The real gifts came in the form of evidence. Reyes presented first. She walked the panel through the forged documents, the retroactive boundary maps, the illegally modified registrar filings. She displayed consent forms signed by dead homeowners, digital metadata showing documents created before their signing date, and emails between Karen and Merton discussing how to fast-track property absorption using clerical loopholes. Then came the financials. Turns out the HOA wasn't just faking membership, they were billing it. Over the past 3 years, they'd collected more than $700,000 from unregistered or falsely added homeowners through compliance fines, retroactive dues, and expedited inspection fees. The money had been funneled through a private HOA managed account, off the books, unreported. Even worse, part of that money was rerouted into campaign donations, personal travel reimbursements, and something charmingly labeled security response incentives, which directly linked to payouts received by Officer Clint Wallace over a 2-year period. That's right, he was on their payroll. When that detail hit the room, Karen finally broke her silence. That money was for community enforcement. Reyes deadpan replied, "You used HOA funds to pay a police officer to ignore criminal trespassing." Karen's lawyer tried to jump in, but the room was shifting. The board was fidgeting. The federal observers were scribbling furiously. It was no longer about boundaries or civil overreach. It was organized racketeering. One by one, the witnesses gave testimony. Janet Moore described the fear of losing her home after receiving fraudulent liens. Victor showed his own fake consent form, complete with an obviously photocopied signature. Another woman, a single mother named Latasha, described a staged compliance inspection that ended with the HOA claiming her porch was unauthorized construction and demanding $6,000 for removal or face a lawsuit. Then Marla stood up. She laid out the legal impossibility of a retroactive HOA absorption, cited precedent, tore apart the registrar's approval process, and concluded with the line, "What Sycamore Bluffs attempted wasn't neighborhood oversight. It was land grabbing dressed in khakis and bylaws." By the time she finished, Karen was visibly sweating. Merton had sunk so far into his chair he looked like he was trying to merge with the floor. Then it got worse. For them. The panel introduced sealed testimony from a cooperating witness, someone inside the HOA who'd turned over audio recordings. In one clip, Karen can be heard telling Grant, "If he doesn't give us the keys, we'll just make it look like he did. We've done it before. He's not special." Another clip had Merton saying, "He wants to get loud. Let him. We'll drown him in paper. If he fights, we file liens." My favorite, though, was Officer Wallace saying, "He's not a member. Doesn't matter. If I don't see a crime, there is no crime." The fallout was immediate. By the end of the session, the panel made 4 formal recommendations. Immediate federal investigation into Sycamore Bluffs HOA under racketeering and fraud statutes. Suspension of all HOA board members pending criminal proceedings. Referral of Officer Clint Wallace to the state's Internal Affairs Division with recommendation for dismissal and prosecution. Temporary receivership of the HOA by an independent third-party manager until legal matters were resolved. Karen's lawyer asked for a recess. The board told him no. They wanted everything recorded, public, transparent. By the time we left the courthouse, news vans were parked like vultures. Amber Klein's updated headline was already live. HOA fraud ring exposed. Federal action underway. The best part? The last email I received that day was from the county's title office. It read, "Dear Mr. Harris, following review of your documentation and sworn testimony, we have confirmed your parcel has never been under the jurisdiction of Sycamore Bluffs HOA. All false documents have been purged. Please accept our apology for the confusion." I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Then I printed that email and taped it to the inside of my front gate. 2 months later, the Sycamore Bluffs neighborhood looked different. The banners were gone. The flyers, the clipboard patrols, the smug HOA windbreakers, all vanished like they'd never been there. The new management firm appointed by the Federal Oversight Committee was professional, quiet, and very interested in one thing, untangling the wreckage left by Karen Blakely's board. Their first act? Dissolve all fraudulent liens, suspend all fines, and refund collected dues to every homeowner who'd been extorted, with interest. Their second act? Lock down access to the HOA accounts, seize all assets under investigation, and provide full financial transparency to the public. And their third? Erase my name from every HOA database. Permanently. Karen was arrested within a week of the hearing. 8 counts of wire fraud, 5 counts of conspiracy, 2 counts of falsifying government records. A 6th charge, interference with federal investigations, was added after she attempted to delete her HOA laptop's hard drive, unaware it had been cloned before the hearing. She pled not guilty at first, but that didn't last. Under pressure, she flipped, gave up Merton, who in turn gave up Wallace. All 3 were indicted. Wallace lost his badge, his pension, his home. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. At trial, it came out that he'd been receiving consulting fees through a shadow maintenance company funded by the HOA, money that tied directly to sabotage operations, including the jamming of my security system and the fake work order that destroyed my gate. In the end, Karen got 8 years in federal prison. Merton and Wallace each got 5. Michael Grant took a plea deal for obstruction and falsifying reports, 3 years probation, community service, and a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board. It wasn't perfect, but it was damn close. As for me, well, I sued them all. not just the HOA, but every board member personally. I sued the fake registrar, the contractor who followed the forged work order, the private law firm that ghost-wrote their fake amendments. The settlement? $1.4 million. And a public apology from the city council, who admitted their systems had failed to protect homeowners from coordinated fraud. I used a chunk of that money to fund a grassroots project with Marla, a public legal resource network for homeowners under HOA abuse. We called it Freehold Defense. And the rest? I bought more land, 2 more acres directly south of my property. When the sale closed, I installed new fencing, upgraded my solar system, and added one last piece to the front gate, a custom aluminum sign. Gate is closed. Keys, they're mine. HOA, they can rot. But the part that really got people's attention, I mounted a copy of the original forged consent form right underneath it, framed in red, with the words, "Tried to own me. Forged this. Got prison instead." And for a while, life was quiet. The neighborhood began to heal. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now waved. Janet's garden won a city award. Victor started writing a book. People talked about Sycamore Bluffs as a cautionary tale. Podcasts covered it. Local universities taught it as a case study. Some HOA boards panicked and revised their charters overnight. I started getting emails from around the country. Some asked for help. Some just said thanks. But the one that stuck with me the most came from a retired cop in Arizona. It said, "Read your story. Been waiting 30 years for someone to take one of them down. You didn't just win, you made it cost them." Yeah, that's the part I liked most.